So now we move on to public participation, and invite the first speaker, which is Emma Lilleveld.
Thank you. I've already spoken on Wednesday about how BK02 and 03 are unsuitable, but I would like to focus today on process. Residents of Tring came on Wednesday in large numbers and spoke passionately about the impact of the plan on their community, with vocal support from their councillors. Residents of West Berkhamsted, by contrast, have had no prior communication from the council, their councillors, landowners, nor the courtesy of pre-consultation by developers. This is a catastrophic breakdown of communication and the democratic process. There is one set of rules for Tring and another for Berkhamsted, which has tipped this process in favour of powerful landowners and facilitated private dialogue, swaying the council and councillors to ignore their own evidence against further development in the Ridge area. You tell us the best thing to do is to approve these sites and resolve infrastructure issues with the developers after the fact. This would be another failure of process. The councillor's own transport report states in plain English that the capacity of surrounding road infrastructure cannot be increased to support more development. The last opportunity to acquire the land to do this was on the previous local plan, so that ship sailed a very long time ago. Residents of West Berkhamsted are very smart and successful people, yet we feel we have passed through a looking glass as you are telling us that the impossible is now possible. We noticed some councillors took to Facebook after Wednesday's meeting and hastily convened a surgery this weekend, but it was too little too late. The timing and sequencing is all back to front and has ignored the community. There is something deeply wrong with the planning process in our town. Residents understand that there will be a new housing policy at national level, but the road is long. The new government is young and struggling. Many other policies are already changing. You are not stumbling at the first hurdle. You are actively taking steps to remove it entirely. BK02 and 03 require a 180-degree reversal of your policy and electoral commitments and would irreversibly damage our town. You have misstepped and you must vote to remove these sites from the plan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma. What I plan to do is to respond at the end of the public participation in the totality. So the next person to speak is Elizabeth O'Reilly.
I understand the need for more housing, but I reject the least worst proposition that sites should be reinstated within the pre-submission local plan to meet targets when they will contravene policy. This premature, knee-jerk reaction is based on the notion that challenge is possible later. The reality is that this will be shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. By reinstating sites BK2 and 3 for 200 houses, national policy, as reflected in HCC's transport plan, will be breached, namely to locate development in areas which are or can be made sustainable, limiting the need to travel wherever possible, with the priority being on walking, cycling and passenger transport. These two ridgetop sites are not and cannot be made sustainable, as supported by the recent transport study, which states that it would not be feasible or cost effective to address all of the town's identified transport issues. It was accepted that the town's topography, combined with a physically constrained road network, will continue to create barriers for walking or cycling, and that the sites will pose a significant challenge in encouraging sustainable travel behaviour. The two sites are located at a major three-way junction on the only north-south road across town. 120 new properties allowed by the council adjacent to the junction remain unsold. Their traffic has yet to impact the road network. Peak hour traffic already backs up along Shooters Way, and if the two proposed site allocations adjacent to the junction traffic lights are built out, the existing traffic chaos is unimaginable. The transport studies suggested mitigating interventions along Shooters Way of 3 pedestrian crossings, a reduced speed limit, and the widening of some, but not all, pavements, requiring pedestrians, including school children, to crisscross the narrow residential road. Increased traffic is an accident waiting to happen. With no consultation and only 2 minutes to speak, I can do no more than ask you to reconsider this ill-thought-through proposal to reinstate BK 2 and 3 in the plan and instead reallocate the 200 houses away from an overdeveloped area so it will not catastrophically impact the whole town's roads. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I understand that Steve Valentine and Keith Baker have a shared statement, but each of you will be speaking. Is it going to be Steve first?
Yes, thank you very much. I'd just like to say first that that statement which was submitted in advance is going to take longer than 4 minutes to read. So we have an abridged statement, which the two of us will read in our 2 minutes each slot, if that's all right. So it's not word for word identical, but essentially says the same thing.
Okay, we haven't started the clock yet.
Oh, great. Councillors, thank you. My name is Steve Ballantyne and I'm a resident of Tring and have been for 25 years. Your officers will tell you what they told the Strategic Planning Committee last Thursday, that you have to adopt this new local plan because otherwise you'll miss the transition arrangements and continue to be vulnerable to developers' speculative applications and potentially higher housing targets. We believe there are compelling reasons why you should go back to your planning team, asking them to amend the plan before the transition arrangements expire. What might not be apparent to you, it certainly wasn't to us from the presentation of the pre-submission plan, is that officers propose to redefine and preemptively cut 280 acres out of the established greenbelt on Tring sites alone. If you agree to this plan, it will mean that those development sites can't be objected to on grounds of harm to the greenbelt. Clever, eh? Not because they somehow become unworthy of that classification, but just so that you can build on them. That's a travesty of the purpose of the greenbelt. A finely judged tactical manoeuvre rather than a principled decision. And it should make all of us feel very angry. Angry enough to reject that lazy planning approach and demand a greater effort to establish alternatives from your officers. I understand your officers have not audited greenbelt sites. Grey belt sites. They will tell you they are undefined and can't be included. But that's a head in the sand approach. Those undefined definitions exist in NPPF draft, and the concept is well understood now by professionals. Given the significant impact on our communities, the proposed changes deserve grey belt assessment before a decision is made to agree the new plan. I also understand that we will know the result of the Natural England consultation proposals regarding the extension of the Chiltern AONB in January. That may well redefine the boundary to include some or all of the Marshcroft site. I ask, why preempt that outcome? It is potentially of enormous significance to site allocation and another reason for you to use your transition time to review and amend the plan. If I could ask Keith now to continue the statement.
Okay, I'm Keith Baker. We both represent the Tring Residents Group, 650 members. Carrying on from Steve, if you choose to accept the new plan, you will be endorsing your planner's proposal to dump their numbers shortfall problem on Tring. In order to achieve their assumed mandatory target for housing, which government indicators suggest might now be in January, they have chosen to include 2 significant sites in Tring with an additional target of 1,800 houses, 1,800. And that's in a town with approximately 5,000 houses, an expansion of 36%. That is the enormity of what we are talking about. Under the previous version of the plan, Tring already had provided or will provide 750 new houses at the Dunsley Farm and Roman Park sites. Our standout declaration to you this morning is Tring has already agreed to do its reasonable proportional share to meet these targets and should not be swamped with new housing that will alter its character and burden its community resources for decades to come. I make no apologies for returning to the Greenbelt. Steve has stated that in endorsing the plan's proposals, you will be responsible for building over 280 acres of Tring Greenbelt, some of it immediately adjacent to the very sensitive Chiltern Sharp AONB. The Liberal Democrats are the party most closely associated with social and environmental values. Can you, in all consequence, endorse a plan that results in such a massive loss of Greenbelt? I'm sure it won't be lost on you that if you recommend this revised plan to the full council tomorrow evening, you will be reneging on the promise made by every local Democrat and Conservative candidate at the borough elections to protect the green belts. Yesterday, our new MP, Victoria Collins, has replied to residents' letters of concern, reiterating her opposition to the Marshcroft proposal and encouraging us to go to our local councillors to reject the plan. We urge you to instruct your officers to take the opportunity within the transition period to look again at the issues we have highlighted and to amend the plan and to fully align it to your election promises to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. I'll make a few remarks and then I will ask James Doe, the Strategic Director for Place, to deal with some of the technical questions. I'm a politician, I'm not a planner. I recognise my limitations. I haven't done a degree in planning, so it would be wrong of me to try and tackle those bits. Thank you, all of you, for coming here and bringing your perspective. We're often in cabinet making decisions. We're often here in cabinet making decisions which are of less public concern. But today we're making a decision which you know, lots of people have emailed me, and as a politician, definitely important to take that seriously. Starting with Emma on a process question about consultation. I will come to James on that point. I think very much in the lead up to the general election, it was apparent that there was a strong possibility that there would be a new government with a very different idea of what to do with planning. But you don't know until you know. I know that officers under the previous portfolio holder made some preparation for what we expected to be coming towards us, as would be prudent. And essentially, I think it's important to understand that this administration looked at the results of the Reg 18 in 2020 and tried to act on them. We put forward a revised Reg 18 consultation, which was at 88% of the assessed housing need, on the basis that there was some wriggle room available with that Secretary of State and that government. With the new government, all local authorities have received a very strong message that there is absolutely no latitude on meeting 100% of the current housing figure. It's important to be clear what you're talking about, because the current housing figure is 1,116. We put forward a number of 894. The new housing number that Dacorum has been given is 1,313. It's 30% higher. What we plan to do, in essence, is the best that we possibly can, which is likely to have any chance of being approved when we present it. If we present a plan to the planning inspector, which is not capable of being adopted, it will fail. It's happened recently in St Albans a couple of years ago. It happened on the third day of the inquiry. So I'm advised, as a politician, that we shouldn't put forward something which is going to fail. It's nonsense. So officers have attempted to put forward something which will not fail. And the way that I appreciate the massive amount of work which has gone in, as I say, prior to the general election, but even more so once we knew that this was a reality. And I think it's important to be clear what the duty of the council is. The duty of the council is to put forward a plan which is capable of protecting the borough from unconstrained development, which we have no control over. So that goes far wider than any one particular settlement. So it doesn't, with all due respect, we're not looking at Tring in isolation. We're not looking at Berkhamsted in isolation. We're not looking at any particular settlement in isolation. We are looking at what can we get approved, and the number we have to hit is 1,116 per year for 15 years, and that's the plan that we've put forward. In order to do that, we've had to take account of evidence from the county council, from landowners as to their ability and their willingness to bring forward certain sites. And we have literally had to use every available site that there is. So particularly in relation to Berkhamsted, the two sites which have been added in there are both quite small sites, particularly in relation to some of the other sites which are being brought forward. I don't mean by that to diminish their importance to local residents, but they show the extent to which we've been obliged to look for sites which can get us to a number that will be accepted. If we go back with less than the number, then we are not even meeting what, for example, St Albans is doing right now. St Albans is sticking to its 100% of its now number on the basis that is, the new number is a question for another day. And what we're doing is trying to do a version of the same thing, but we're having to address the fact that we are less than the 100% number now. So I'll try and, I probably could talk forever about this, but we better not. In relation to Elizabeth's comments on transport particularly, but ranging wider than that, it illustrates the role of a local plan. We haven't had a local plan. The last time the local plan was anew here was 11 years ago. A local plans are really difficult things to progress, particularly when there's changes at political level, particularly in Westminster. And bearing in mind that we're on NPPF 6 now, which we started that process in 2010, I think. You can see how the planning situation moves around. But the purpose of having a local plan is so that you can address transport issues. So in my mind, what we have to do as a council is get to a local plan which is adopted, and then we have to start from a stable base to establish what changes to transport infrastructure we really need, and then put them into our next local plan. Given the timescales that we have, we officers simply could not do the work that needs to be done. We would need 5 more teams of officers, and we don't have the resources to be able to search for sites which don't even exist. You can't literally point at a piece of land and say, well, that looks like a good piece of land, we'll develop it. Because if you don't know the landowner, or if the landowner is not interested in progressing, then there are limitations. And I'll come to James in a moment with the technical stuff. So in terms of Steve and Keith, your statement, I've read it several times. It's a hard-hitting statement. I find some of it a little bit harsh, if I'm honest. I think all of us sitting here are trying to do our best for the entire community, and we're relying on officers to advise us when it goes beyond our own knowledge, and we're trying to take a judgment on a very unique set of circumstances. When we came in and did our Reg 18, we tried to do what we thought we could do at that time. We went for a number which was lower than the 100% figure, and we were prepared to argue for it. That was precisely because the government of the day indicated that there was wriggle room. The government that's been elected in July, you would have probably noticed, has made some enormously significant statements on a whole range of issues, and one of those is planning. They absolutely appear to be determined to go for growth, and in going for growth, what they absolutely need to do is change the planning policy, and they fully intend to do it. So given the rest of the circumstances in Dacorum, where we're trying to attract investment, not least from government, it would be an invidious position to be taking on the government on a point of principle, particularly one where I thought that the technical information was that we were bound to lose. So I fully accept it's a pragmatic decision, it's a tough decision. It's not one that I plan to take. You know, the Reg 18, if we had been able to get to our Reg 19 before a November election, we'd be in a different place. But the election happened in July. There was an emphatic result, and the government has come straight out of the blocks quicker than any government I've ever known, saying we will do this, 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 and this. And one of those directly affects Dacorum. So if we pause now, Whitehall has said that they will take control. They're literally hiring people to be able to take over from these people and do it themselves.
Could you just repeat that last bit, sorry?
The government has hired or is hiring an army of planners who will take over from these people. If we don't go for a Reg 19 and if we don't progress with our local plan, and it's part of why we're doing it. The reality is that as soon as we say we're going to pause our plan and we're not going to proceed, what we're basically saying, what we are essentially saying, is that we are going to make a plan according to the NPPF 7. The NPPF 7 is 1,313 per year. It's going to take us 2 to 3 years to do the technical work, or in some cases redo the technical work, which has to be done. You can't just build and not have a plan with Hertfordshire about where the schools are going to go and where the roads are going to go and how that's going to work. And it takes time to put that together. It takes years. And that's part of the reason why we can't suddenly change the transport arrangements in Berkhamsted, as I understand. So I'll try. So what that means is we would then be saying, we don't have a plan. Any developer who wants to develop any site anywhere in Dacorum could come forward with that site. And if they were prepared to spend the money in their pockets, we would have to spend money that we don't have to defend it. We would have to. We could easily be into millions, which, bearing in mind the current NPPF, which we're due to talk about in a while, that dwarfs anything that we're talking about there in our medium-term financial plan. So, I mean, I hope you can appreciate how big this is, and why a pragmatic decision is on my mind. I think I'm probably going to leave it there and hand over to James. I mean, I'm reluctant. I voted for the Reg 18. We all did last year because we thought we were in different circumstances, but we're not in those circumstances, and we have to treat the world as it is rather than how we would like it to be. James, can you deal with some of the technical questions?
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, local residents, for your contributions this morning. I think, Leader, I've got very little to add to what you've said, because you've given a very comprehensive reply, but I will pick up on a few points, if I may. Just in this point about if the council fails to adopt a plan, as you say, the feedback we're getting from central government is that they are bringing in resources to take over the control of local plans where they need to. They would have to then intervene. If we fail to adopt a plan, then they can recover the process. So we're certainly not at that point yet, but I think the point is we wouldn't want to put the council in that position, and then you won't have your in-house team or you making the decision on the plan. It will be external professionals doing that, and it may well be under the new MPPF circumstances, just as you've pointed out as well. And I think the other thing, just to add to what you've said, Leader, on these implications, and that there is the risk of further speculative predatory applications coming in if we do not have an up-to-date local plan as well. Yes, there is absolutely a cost to that, Leader, and if the council is refusing planning applications in the absence of an up-to-date local plan, it's not in a strong position. It will need to commit resources to it, and of course Nigel Howcups this morning is talking to us about our MTFS, our medium-term financial strategy as the next item on the agenda. However, there is a wider point to this, and that is that our housing land supply is currently very low as well, and that puts the council in a weak position to defend those applications. We'll be in a better position to deal with those appeals if they come in, if you proceed to approve the Regulation 19 and then submit it to the Secretary of State. So I just wanted to draw that point out as well. Again, I think on the point of the transitionary period, Leader, you've covered that already. We are in a very tight position if the council is going to meet this transitionary window. We're in the difficult position because we're not entirely sure when it starts, because it only starts when the government approves its latest version of the National Planning Policy Framework, and we're hearing conflicting reports about that. Will it be before Christmas? Will it be in the new year? Baroness Taylor of Stevenage, one of the ministers in the Department for Housing, Communities and Local Government, did indicate a few weeks ago it may not be until the new year. And then we've got a month beyond that to get that in. Just so members of the public are aware, we've actually asked for that period to be extended to 3 months to give a little bit more latitude. But the point I want to make to everyone here is that even if we had that extra time, there is not the time to remodel another alternative here. So there isn't the land that is genuinely available at the moment to meet the higher figure of the 1,313 per annum. But even if we were looking at alternatives within that current target of 1,016, we would have to go and remodel a lot of those infrastructure points, Chair, that you're referring to, particularly with the County Council again. And I think this just brings me on to my next point, because points were made about, particularly in relation to Berkhamsted, and the first two speakers were referring to the transport connections. 2 points, I think, here, members. One is that we have a very comprehensive infrastructure delivery plan, which members of the public may have looked at. It's available for inspection. There are a series of interventions there proposed to deal with that. But the wider point here is that we're talking about an allocation at the moment. The detail of what improvements are needed on the transport network, both in relation to those sites and the wider town as well, we can follow up as the plan progresses. So it's very helpful to have this feedback from members of the public, and indeed from local councillors as well, Chair, that I've had feedback on that basis. These are discussions we can be having with the county and with the developers, but it's important just to note that those issues around, I mean, this was raised at the scrutiny committee last week, things like lack of crossing points, footways, child safety in terms of routes to school and so on. So we can certainly pick up on these points. In terms of process, the process so far, of course, is to get this plan to members through the scrutiny committee and here, and then there's a meeting of full council tomorrow. The message I'd give to everyone at the moment is that should council approve the plan tomorrow evening, then we will go to the Regulation 19 consultation. It's very important, if anybody wants to continue in the process and be able to express a view, is to register under our Let's Talk Dacorum facility, so that you can be hooked into the council's official consultation database. You can then comment online on the plan, etc., and make your views known. The views, of course, will be sent to the planning inspector, but it's very, very important at this stage of the process that people do that and make their representations in the prescribed format that the inspector will need to see when this goes. So I'll stop there, Chairman, unless I just invite Ronan Layden, our Head of Strategic Planning, if she wants to add anything to what I've said, or Thank you, Chair.
You haven't answered the point about taking Greenbelt out of Greenbelt. Also, we haven't answered the point about grey.
That's my questions either. That the infrastructure in Berkhamsted actually cannot be expanded, and your report actually says that. So your infrastructure plan means nothing if there is physically no land within the highway boundary to improve the highways. So you've just made a statement about improving highways and pavements. There is nothing in your proposal that says that that is possible.
Emma, I mean, I'm really keen to have an open approach to this, but the circumstances are that this isn't a debate. But I think it's really helpful that
both... You haven't answered the question. You haven't responded to the comments.
I know. I think
you've made completely different points.
I think it's really helpful that you pointed out those 2 points, and I'm going to ask the officers to address them now. But I'm afraid this isn't a debate format, so...
And I will write to you afterwards about
sure.
The misstatements that have just been made.
Well, hopefully we can address them now.
Chair, thank you. And this is Ronan and I here this morning, so I'm sure Ronan can pick those points up as well. So
yeah, I'll do my best
to avoid those. Thank you.
And thank you. So I think firstly on the point of transport, now that it's there, it's probably worth, I've made reference to it at the scrutiny meeting last week, that we have worked with expert transport consultants, ACOM, to produce a Berkhamsted and Tring transport strategy, and we've done a separate one for Hemel Hempstead. The single aim of that study is to identify how people can safely move from where the new growth is planned to other parts of those towns and settlements, including the town centre, the train stations and areas of employment. It's 136 pages as a document, and includes, I think, 7 appendices, including performers for how transport infrastructure will be delivered at particular detailed locations, including junctions between sites and the wider town. So that is something I was, ask members and indeed members of the public to pay particular attention to when looking at this and considering whether those interventions go far enough. It's the view of ourselves as officers and those of the consultants that have prepared that evidence that is sufficient, and that has been developed in accordance and with input from the county council, who wanted to ensure that it's meeting the requirements of the local transport plan. They're comfortable that it is going the right direction, and they're comfortable that what's in there represents sound evidence for this. I think just on some other points, if I may, just to be clear on certain points about land in the Greenbelt. Now, it's not the decision right now of council to tomorrow to make changes to the Greenbelt. So if full council approved tomorrow this plan, changes to the Greenbelt do not happen then. What will happen is we proceed with what we call the Regulation 19 consultation or publicity period, and then we will hopefully move on to local plan examination, where a planning inspector will consider the views of residents and key stakeholders who put them forward alongside our evidence of the local plan. And they'll consider whether changes are needed to be made to that plan before it should be progressed to adoption. Now, we've heard some examples from St. Albans where that has fallen foul at an early stage. Importantly, after full council and after examination, if this plan is to be adopted and changes made to the Greenbelt, it is for full council following adoption or following the recommendation of inspector to formally adopt the plan after examination. And when that is the case, that is the process, that once it is adopted by the council following examination, that is when the changes to the Greenbelt take place. So there's a number of iterations and steps between now and what I would say is 2026, where matters will be discussed. People will have their chance to air their concerns with an independent planning inspector with regards to the growth that we're proposing in our plan, particularly in the Greenbelt. And just to note that where we stand in the Greenbelt, we have been very consistent in our line through all our 3 consultations that exceptional circumstances exist to justify changes to the Greenbelt, and that's the requirement of national policy. One of those matters includes meeting the housing requirement, but also ensuring that it will deliver the right infrastructure in the right places. A final point here, if I may, just on Greenbelt, and there was a slight reference to Greybelt on this, and I just want to be clear on this because it is an important topic. It's part of the draft new NPPF and it's not finalised. Importantly, the last 2 times we consulted, we were in the shadow of a draft NPPF that ultimately told us, well, we need to do more than what we're consulting on as an outcome. And that, is a difficult challenge to meet. Looking at the new NPPF, and just being clear, just for Cabinet and for those here today, that the definition of Greybelt, the draft definition is that it's defined as land in the Greenbelt comprising previously developed land
and any other parcels, so that doesn't mean previously developed land, any other parcels or areas of the Greenbelt land that make a limited contribution to the 5 Greenbelt purposes. Now, importantly, I would say from my perspective is that our evidence on what makes a limited contribution to the purpose of the Greenbelt is set out in our Stage 2 Greenbelt study. And I would say that the vast majority of the sites that have been put forward, including, just for reference, BFI and Haslam Painfields, are identified in that study from 2016 as being within land that contributes weakly to the purposes of the Greenbelt. So our recommendations are recognising that we are looking at land and recommending land that is, part of a study that identifies that some of that land does not make, much contribution towards the purpose of the Greenbelt. And that's been there, as I said, for 8 years now as a study. And, we're not looking to change that because ultimately the setting hasn't really changed in that time. A final point on Berkhamsted, if I may, is that being very, very mindful of Greenbelt and growth and recognition of the concerns of transport and everything else. We are allocating 2 sites, one of which is the British Film Institute, PK02. That is a previously developed site on land not performing weekly in the Greenbelt. It is also clearly set out in the plan. We do not expect that site to come forward until very late in the plan period, 2038. So we are still some way off, a good 14 years before we expect that land to come forward for development. After which we expect a lot of the other interventions set out in that study will be delivered through the other growth in the plan and through other speculative development within the built-up area. And finally, with that, if I may as well, just with regards to Berkhamsted, in 2020, we recommended 6 additional Greenbelt sites at Berkhamsted, totaling another 660 homes that we're not recommending today. And that's important too. We do listen, we do take heed. We do ask people to go in and do further work. And if they don't produce the work for us, we're not going to be in a comfortable place to be recommending them at this stage. A final point on AONB, it's been referenced and I'm just conscious, and I'll stop after this if I may. Jutton's National Landscape, it's under review. You're absolutely right. We're expecting some outputs on that. It has been delayed and delayed and delayed. And it was supposed to be due at spring this year. Some of the outputs and consultations on changes to the Greenbelt. That's been led by Natural England, and the Jutton's AONB board are working closely on that also. As part of the process of preparing this plan at the various engagement stages, and indeed we do have regular engagement with Natural England, as is part of the duty to cooperate, they've not expressed any concerns that their emerging findings is going to be in conflict with what we're recommending in terms of changes to the Greenbelt. That's been what they've expressed their view on this.
Can I ask a question on that?
You may, yes.
On that point, if Natural England come back and say that Marshcroft shouldn't be developed, what happens?
I think we will have to take that on board and consider that at that point in time. Inspector would have to do that also.
So that would basically, it's my understanding that the process from here on is that whereas with the Reg 18, the comments were made to Dacorum, and Dacorum processed them, and we did indeed change our plan partly as a result of some of that feedback. With Reg 19, that feedback is collected by us, but it goes directly to the planning inspector, and the planning inspector has the power to do pretty much what they decide is in the best interest. So the planning inspector can change our plan, but we can't. We have to come to a point of this is the plan that we think is the best that we can put forward, which is capable of being adopted. Can I be really clear that I think my voting record and all of these people here shows that this isn't what we want to do. Given the latitude to do something else, we would have chosen to do something else. But in the particular circumstances that we are in, it would be, frankly, irresponsible on a borough-wide level to do something else. Thank you again for...
Sorry, I appreciate that this isn't a debate, and I just want to make one point with the greatest respect to Mr. Laidlaw, Mr. Laidlaw said, so far as the traffic consultant's report, and I've written it down, that they are comfortable it is going in the right direction. With the greatest of respect, I quoted within my statement directly from that report in which they have actually taken a very different view. So I think that that was actually a misleading, with the greatest respect, a misleading comment to say that they're feeling it's going in the right direction. What they actually said was that it wasn't feasible or cost effective to address all of the town's identified transport issues, and that actually these sites will pose a significant challenge in encouraging sustainable traffic behaviour. It doesn't matter what little adjustments you put in with pedestrian crossings, it doesn't deal with the actual overriding problem.
And so I think that that would have to be part of your feedback on the Reg 19 to the planning inspector. Indeed, the planning inspector may read that and decide that that it is a significant part of. They may decide, but I'm afraid we have to come to a point.
I understand, but all I'm saying is that actually just don't go there in the first place, because there is a real issue with traffic in Berkhamsted. It is what it is.
Can I finally, as the last point on this, just, although we are coming back to local plan.
We will be on the plan, yes.
Yeah, I'll do it now because we're all here.
Yeah.
If those two Berkhamsted sites were taken out in Reg 19, would we have confidence that it would be accepted by the planning inspector? Presume the answer is no, because they're there.
I think the answer would be no at this stage. That would be my professional view on it, just to keep it simple.
Okay, right. So the way the agenda is working is that we are going to come back to the local plan.
So, Chair, in the interests of, democracy and public participation,
Yes.
There does seem to be a couple of themes that haven't been thoroughly addressed. Is it appropriate to do this now or wait for the local plan?
Do it in the local plan.
We'll come back to the agenda. Unfortunately, council agendas work this way. The public participation is dealt with at the beginning, what we could perhaps do is take the local plan as the first item.
You could shift it.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do is shift the agenda around so that we can get to the local plan and then come back to Councillor Allen at that point. We have item 5, referrals to Cabinet. There are no referrals to Cabinet this time. And then Cabinet forward plan. I'll just touch briefly on that. Are there any additions to Cabinet forward plan? No, there are none. In which case we then come to item 8 in advance of item 7. Item 8 is the local plan. We've already had quite a discussion on it so far, but Councillor Allen, would you like to say what you've got to say?
Yes, I have some questions of my own, but there's a couple of strands that I think maybe the residents' questions haven't quite been fully addressed. Firstly, Ronan addressed the matter of grey belts in relation to the specific sites in Berkhamsted, but where have we got to on assessment of grey belt potential elsewhere in the borough? And the other question is the issue of this feeling that Berkhamsted have had things hoisted on them in a way that Tring residents had more warning. So what was the timing and dynamic of these sites coming forward again and Berkhamsted residents having an opportunity to comment on them?
Same point true of Tring, actually. We didn't know anything about the sites being put back in last week.
Thank you.
Where's the consultation on that?
Unfortunately, it's really important that we don't turn Cabinet into a scrutiny debate, because we had that on Wednesday last week. Ronan.
Yes, thank you. So there's a number of sites we're recommending within the Regulation 19 pre-submission plan that, in my view, based on the current definition or draft definition of grey belt, would likely constitute that. Those sites, just for clarity and reference, include Chendish Manor. There's a site that doesn't perform well against the green belt, and the study recommends its release. South of Berkhamsted as well, at Berkhamsted also. I mentioned BFI Haslam Plainfields. At Tring, Dudsley Farm was partly recommended for release from the greenbelt through that study, and New Mill was also recommended also for further consideration. Then we note also, just on a slight aside, that the larger villages, I note that we did previously have a draft allocation of Rectory Farm. We're conscious that that has now got permission on appeal as well, having regard to, the inspector had regard to greenbelt studies as part of that decision. Grange Farm in Bovingdon, we've also now, I think, recently issued a decision on that, and that's another site. That was granted for, I think, equivalent to 217 homes. South of London Road and Markyate is also one of those that the same greenbelt study is recommended. So there's quite a few with regards to what we are recommending is having regard to what the greenbelt study in terms of its weekly performing. On the matter of previously developed land and what else we've looked at, as I said, we haven't exhaustively looked at because part of the government's consultation said we want feedback on what the definition of greenbelt should be. So it's something they're specifically asking about, not saying this is it and we intended for it to be this. They want it to be a meaningful consultation. So previously developed land is really only can be any bit of developed land, but it only becomes previously developed land once there is an intent to develop it. That is where it gets changed from just being developed land to something with the intent to develop. So it's quite hard to look at because tomorrow a certain site might say, I now want to bring this forward for development and we're not aware of it today on that. So that's an important point. There are sites out there we see in the planning system right now, and I think it's probably important for context that I will take one example and just for context. We have Shaffolds, or not Shaffolds, we have the proposal just south of Berkhamsted. No, it's not Dacorum, it's the one that went to committee. Haresford Farm. Now, Haresford Farm is an old farm, basically, that was, over time, became a source of local employment and business and things like that, and therefore fell away from its agricultural purpose. And they recently then, in recent years, have been looking to bring forward that site for development. Now that, I would say, based on the strict definition, was recently consulted on by government, that is previously developed land in the greenbelt. Now, from a plan perspective, I would say that site, in terms of it building houses, is remote from any settlement and distance from services and facilities. But that is the tone of what grey belt may be. What we will likely see through that definition, and in the absence of a local plan being up to date, is more remote developments on sites in remote locations, no longer be considered inappropriate in the greenbelt and able to come forward without needing to demonstrate the very special circumstances. So it's, dare I say, there is an intention there to accelerate housing delivery, but I think when we look at it in the local plan perspective and spatial strategy, we want to focus our growth to the most sustainable locations. And we've looked comprehensively around our 6 main settlements, and we have looked at the potential for new settlements in the area as well. And we put call for brownfield sites out a number of years ago with very limited return on that. We've done quite a lot of measures to try and address and make sure that we're maximising the use of previously developed and brownfield land. And I think that our strategy, when you look at it, by context and example, I think, is seeking to do that with, 1,500 homes on brownfield land in the Two Waters and Apsley area, another 1,500 homes in the town centre. Those numbers are slightly bigger than the Marshcroft site by itself. And that's kind of the level this plan is trying to do to encourage brownfield development. What we would say is we could look at grey belt sites, but what we might find and recommend is perhaps something that is contrary to what we're looking at in terms of what we would see as sustainable development. I hope that's helpful. Does that clarify the points? Thank you.
Did you have any other? I think you said
yes. The timing and engagement with residents about the sites in Berkhamsted.
Can you put that into a question?
Yes, can you elaborate on why it is that residents haven't had consultation and what the timing was of this process?
Yes, thank you. I think the first thing to note is with regards to the local plan, we've been through 3 extensive consultations, Regulation 18 consultations in 2020, which was a full draft plan that included more greenbelt sites than where we are today. In 2023, we had another consultation that responded to the emerging position of government at that time regarding greenbelts and other matters. And we are, again, as I said, in 2017, we also did an issues and options. So Communities have been engaged thoroughly in this process, and it's all about delivering information at the right time. We only recently finalised our evidence to inform our recommendations, and that's the matter of timing. That if we were to engage earlier in this process without having the complete picture, it would be very, very difficult to have meaningful engagement with communities and otherwise. I think what to note, I would say, is always, from experience on this, I've dealt with 2 previous plans that were successful at examinations, that Regulation 18 consultations are meaningful consultations and engagement. And I think if we presented a final plan 12 months ago and said that we have all the evidence and all the answers, it's not an engagement. It's us telling them our response and our solution. And we can continue to do Regulation 18s, but there is always an expectation that we may change parts of our plan as a result of that. And for that reason, what we have published today is that we consider the right timing for this. We have published our recommendations, our local plan, all our evidence. We published it last week, or the week before last, and with the aim that that is all available for people to review, scrutinise and respond to as part of a Regulation 19 publicity period in November and December, hopefully. So there's a conscious reason that, you know, we can only engage so much, and we have to make sure we have the answers at the right time to do it. The purpose of a Regulation 19 is where officers and the council feels confident that it represents and constitutes a sound plan. So I appreciate and understand the concerns about changes being made at this late stage. Ultimately, you know, we have to have regard in December last year to a new NPPF that basically made clear that, you know, housing in its own right does not constitute, or housing in its own right cannot, or greenbelt in its own right cannot justify a lower housing requirement, set up in the scrutiny report. We've also had updated feedback on habitats regulations assessment, the identification of suitable alternative natural green space. We've seen a number of applications come forward, legal agreements being signed for a suitable alternative natural green space, which is tied to growth and development, and we have our own strategy for that also set out in the plan. All of these factors emerge over time, and we do have to, ultimately, I would say, it's always prudent to make our decisions and recommendations in a formal and timely context where it can be debated, it can be discussed through forums like this, and then have the ability to engage more widely as part of the next steps. Is that okay? Yeah, thank you, sir.
Making sense. I mean, I think I would just underline again that this is a circumstance where the NPPF changed in December of last year, after we had done our Reg 18 once, and then there was a general election, which then immediately there was an announcement of a very substantial change to a Reg 18. And our response, which is coming into this Reg 19, is a product of addressing those changed circumstances, but also operating within a very constrained time window, which still may expire on us. We don't have the luxury of waiting a little bit to see if something else turns up. We have to make a decision now, otherwise we go over the ledge and we're into 1,313 per year. But we're also into planning by appeal. We're also into not having the latitude to, or the leverage to be able to say to developers, this is our local plan and you need to meet our terms. So it's a rather a perfect storm. I'm really grateful that we've been able to hear from you as members of the public. If there is anything additional, then I'm afraid it will have to be by letter.
I submitted a question on Friday that's not been answered. Is somebody able to answer that now?
Which was submitted as part of this thing?
Sorry, I shall read it out. Apologies, this is me not reading the right-hand column. The question is, which we'd like to try and answer at this meeting: when did the respective owners of BK02 and BK03 approach the council for their sites to be reinstated in the local plan? And what recommendation did the council make to them on pre-consultation with the local community?
Okay, thank you. I can answer that. Ultimately, I'll go back to my earlier comment regarding the previous local plan consultations. So just to be clear, that in the 2020 draft plan consultation, they were both recommended to be included because they had promoted their sites before then. In 2023, we recommended to remove those sites because they did not have, we did not have sufficient clarity on the identification of suitable alternative natural green space to support smaller sites in the plan. So it was a habitats regulations assessment matter and a legal requirement to identify mitigation, which we weren't at the time 12 months ago sufficiently confident to be able to do that then. Following, as I said, that consultation, they promoted their land through that, so it is part of our evidence and available on the website, and you will see from our report that went to scrutiny in March 2024, following that consultation, that they had promoted that land, their land again, and we take that evidence into account as we would take any feedback we receive from that consultation. And as I note that there are 2 sites that we've recommended in this plan, there's many, many more sites which have sought to be included in this plan that we have said we do not believe is right or appropriate to do so. So they were included following that. In terms of public engagement, that is something ultimately that the site promoters lead on. It's not something that the local plan gets actively involved in. Normally, what I would say as a rule of thumb is that those promoters will look to engage actively with the community, usually in the months leading up to the submission of a formal planning application, which is separate from preparation of a local plan. It's ultimately us that take the responsibility for making the recommendations on what sites meet growth in the plan. It is a completely separate matter for those to engage with communities prior to submitting a planning application. So I'm conscious there is a number of sites out there that will be promoting themselves to the communities, but may not necessarily be in the plan right now as well. And that is probably part of the process informing a future planning application.
That's the point of clarification. That March.
This will have to be the last thing.
Thank you. The March 24 process, you referred to it as a consultation. The community has not received any notification from the council under the Let's Talk Dacorum thing since December. If that was a consultation and you feel that the community has an opportunity to input at that point, why was it not notified by under Let's Talk Dacorum? I have not had an email from that through that system since December, which was when the consultation on the previous plan closed. So you haven't notified the public. This has all been done in secret.
If I may, thank you. I think that's a fair point, and that's something I think we'll absolutely take away. I think the purpose of what we presented in March 2024 to scrutiny at the time was an objective summary of the key issues raised, and never once set out our response to those key issues. It was too early and too premature in March to be making those sorts of responses. This is in essence what we are doing today, is setting out our response to that and setting out the response to all previous consultations on this. But as I said, what that was a very objective summary, setting out the key issues raised, which include make particular reference to a number of these points raised today, which we have had regard to. And as I said, some of our decision making has responded to those issues regarding transport and scales of growth in places such as Tring and Berkhamsted. But we do have to balance that with the requirements of national policy and the expectations of local government in delivering new local plans.
Okay, thank you. Do you have some other points, Councillor Allen?
Yes, I've got some other questions. Of course, there's been a lot of correspondence and, there are some issues that have been raised by residents' correspondence that didn't really get aired at the strategic planning meeting. So I've just got a couple of questions, if I may, to whichever of you is best placed to answer. Given the sensitive nature of Marshcroft, does not putting Marshcroft into the local plan potentially cause more predatory development because nothing in Dacorum is sacred anymore?
I'll pick that one up here. Thank you, Councillor Allen. No, I wouldn't agree with that. I mean, the situation with Marshcroft, I think we've officers made it clear why it's in the local plan to help meet our housing target as well. The bigger risk for the council is by not having an adopted plan, and the addition of Marshcroft itself will help the council's housing land supply. And again, I think I made this point in a slightly different way earlier in the meeting, that if we don't have an adopted local plan, then the council is at more risk of speculative applications being allowed because of the absence of an up-to-date local plan, as the leaders referred to, but also because our housing land supply is very low, and that's currently at 1.37 years, and we're supposed to have a minimum of 5 at the moment. That's been declining ever since the Marshcroft planning application went to appeal. We were somewhere in the region of just over about 2.19, I think, at that point, really. So I wouldn't expect to accept that argument, but just encouraging the council to get its local plan in place.
And if I may, does the increasing targets presumably affects that land supply calculation? And so is that declining also because the expectations on the Dacorum are rising?
Yes, and this comes back to the point that Ronan made earlier in terms of where we are in the process. We are seeking to have this plan examined by the inspector under the current National Planning Policy Framework as it stands, not the version that the government has recently consulted on, particularly in relation to housing numbers and so on. So if we found ourselves in the position where we were under the new NPPF when it's adopted, where the number would rise to the 1,313, then absolutely, as you say, that supply is judged not on 1,016 per annum, but 1,313, so that it will diminish even further in terms of number of years or parts of years.
And the other strand that's coming out of correspondence is, on the one hand, Dacorum is facing the danger of predatory development, and that's a threat that is being much talked about. But on the other hand, the borough is saying that there aren't enough advanced sites available as alternatives. So there seem to be sort of two contradictory statements being made there. Is there any way that you can explain how those are reconciled?
So yes, I think with that, I mean, we have had some predatory applications as a public inquiry for one in Hemel Hempstead at the land of west of Leighton Buzzard Road, which I should add, Leader, of course, is not within the plan, and that's more for sort of site suitability reasons than anything else. But the assessment that members have in front of them in terms of the content of the plan is a balance really of sites that have to be genuinely available, because the challenge that officers will have when they're in the examination situation is that they have to demonstrate to the inspector that the sites are actually deliverable, and that's why we've had to look carefully and check back in with developers, landowners about the status of their developments. And as we've been briefing members recently, some sites we thought would come forward in the last Reg 18 version, particularly some of the brownfield sites within Hemel Hempstead, we can't say hand on heart that they are genuinely available at the moment. But it does rather bring us back to this point about having the Reg 19 advance, because it does put us in a stronger position to sort of defend those. We can't stop predatory applications coming in. Any applicant can apply for plan inclusion at any time, but it's just about the council being in the strongest position it can before the local plan is adopted. And I think just one sort of further point really, that if there are landowners and developers whose sites don't end up who aren't in the local plan, then they will have the opportunity to bring those to the planning inspector through the examination process, and the inspector will have to consider those on the merits.
So on that, apologies if I'm mangling your question, but I'm going to try not to. I think I'm trying to we're trying to just understand why there aren't more sites which are capable of technical qualification and which have willing landowners. Is it because they just don't exist? Is it because there's a limit to how much resource can go into trying to identify these? Is it because the target keeps moving and you have to keep redoing work? What's going on there?
Yeah, I think the best starting point I can probably offer on this is that every site allocation has 3 tests that will ultimately be asked by an inspector. Is it suitable for development? Which is there any technical reasons why this site cannot deliver homes or indeed another use allocated in it? And that includes access and that includes transport and those bits. Can it safely be delivered? The second point is whether it's available. So is the land available for development? Is it being actively promoted and there's a reasonable intention that the site and the land will come forward at the time intended in the plan? Which is why in our plan we set out estimated kind of years when we expect the development to come forward and be delivered. And then the third one is that achievable, suitable, available and achievable. And achievable is regarding viability, that the burden and the expectations of the local plan and its requests will not render a scheme unviable, that it will just not deliver anything at all. So there's the 3 tests in there that inspector will ask for every single site. And if it fails on any of those 3 accounts, it shouldn't be allocated in the plan. So we have considered land that's not promoted or land that was historically promoted and where circumstances have changed. We've seen a lot of our sites promoted to us come forward speculatively and achieve planning permission within the built-up areas. There is a number of sites, as I mentioned too, that will continue to promote themselves to want to be in the plan as what we call emission sites. And I think, if to be fair, our sustainability appraisal, which is part of our evidence-based informing member decision, spells out a wide range of alternative sites that ultimately still satisfy those 3 tests, could feasibly come forward, but ultimately, spell out a number of options for how growth could be delivered. Insofar as the question about a new government, a new targets 4,500 homes, there is not enough land that we consider that meets those 3 tests of suitable, available and achievable that could in theory meet 4,500 new homes. So therefore, I think a point, in terms of that, from our recommendation is that if we were to look to address that, we would need to go back to the start rather than continue on where we're at. And we would have to go back to the early stages of plan making, put another call for sites out to see what other land is out there that can be promoted by landowners to us that could be suitable and achievable, and which could be in that. So we do have a number of sites, and as I said, those ones west of Berkhamsted that will continue to want to be in the plan. We're ultimately saying no, technically it's unsafe and it's not suitable and will overload Shooter's Way and it's inappropriate and not correct. And we will take our view on that to the examination table, if this plan is approved in its current form. But ultimately, we don't have solutions to unlock additional growth right now and to enable kind of more homes and more land to be identified at this stage. Is that sufficient?
I think so. So I think what you're saying is the sites that we have available, which have been put into the Reg 19, meet all of those 3 tests.
Yeah.
So there are other sites which meet 2 of them, but not 3.
Yeah.
And there might be other sites that meet 1 of them, but not 3.
That's correct.
And for those reasons, those sites have not been included. And therefore, there literally is nothing else that we could credibly put in the plan. Is that right?
It's right. It's a legal requirement of the local plan that the SA, Sustainability Appraisal, considers the strategy against alternatives. We have to consider alternatives. That's sustainability appraisal includes lower growth options and includes higher growth options as part of it. And it puts them out in a manner that is credible. But ultimately, when we consider our strategy and where we fundamentally want to protect our settlements from merging, through erosion of the green belt, say east of Berkhamsted, west of Hemel, towards one another, we feel that's not correct and not appropriate. And we want each settlement to maintain.
So are you saying there then that one of the primary purposes of Greenbelt is to prevent merging of settlements, and from a planning point of view, a less primary purpose of Greenbelt is keeping green space?
It's a planning designation that is there to prevent urban sprawl. The purpose being it was put around London with the intention to stop London from sprawling, so that settlements would not continue to merge into one another. That has been the overarching focus and thing of Greenbelt. It does include, consider encroachment into the countryside. These are other matters. The overarching one is a planning one to prevent settlements from merging.
Thank you, Councillor Allen and Councillor Smith-White.
Thank you. Yes, I understand we are being asked to do something that isn't naturally, doesn't sit particularly well with any of us. I feel we are cornered, we have to make this decision. And as far as building houses go, I would very much like to see the houses that we build are sustainable, are not houses that we just plonk people into. These are houses for the future. These are communities for the future, with the environment very much in mind and the kind of challenges we have. And I would really like to see Dacorum as the gold standard in sustainable eco building. And I'd like us to talk to these developers right from the word go and ask them to put sustainability and the ecological emergency at the forefront. So whatever houses we build, we are confident that our children and our children's children will be pleased we built them, and it will not be a travesty to our towns and villages.
Can I just add to what you just said? And as in our new strategies, we have been talking that we want to be a listening council. So we're making sure that resident feedback is actually taking in terms of the infrastructure they need, because they are the one who live there. They're the one who knows what's most needed in the area. I mean, we have been focusing in gathering any evidence, any feedback we're getting and making sure we pass it through. But I mean, I think if we put that along with what Councillor Caroline said, I think we can ensure we get the right infrastructure and right sort of houses in our Dacorum Council area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
A couple of comments there. Councillor Brom.
Yeah, just to reinforce that again, one of the reasons I came into this was to really push forward on the efficiency of heating of homes and active and sustainable travel and things like that. So, I'm really keen to retain control of this plan so that we can actually put our aspirations forward and get those implemented so we can be, a very good district in those terms. Those sorts of actions will reduce the cost of living and the quality of life, reduce pollution and so on. And also ask another clarification of Ronan, I think, because I'm not an expert on planning either, but it sounded to me as though there are concerns about the South or West Berkhamsted sites in terms of their accessibility, that people will want to drive to the station, and the High Street, as we know, is already very congested in Berkhamsted. So if the sites, Berkhamsted 2, 3 and 4, don't sort of meet those three criteria in the view of the inspectors, is there a chance that they will then fall out of the plan?
I think there is every chance of that, and from my experience, I'm not going to lie, I've been through 2 successful local plan examinations in Oxfordshire. Both of those, an inspector made changes to the sites within that plan, in those plans. So there's every opportunity for the sites within the plan to change as part of the examination process. And you're absolutely right on that. Yes, probably that's the simple answer. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to underline a positive aspect to local plans. It's a reality that these discussions very often centre around housing numbers, but it's also really important to realise that local plans are firstly a protection against completely unconstrained development, and secondly they are a way of having a negotiation with developers to extract infrastructure improvements at a higher level than you can get with random planning applications. So I accept that we've already heard today that some of the infrastructure that is needed and that's recognised by local residents is difficult to achieve, but these things are impossible to achieve without a local plan. And so the council's objective very much is to get ourselves to a point where we have a local plan and we have a proper platform to be able to say to developers, if you develop here, you will make some money from the houses and flats that you develop, but you will also leave a lot of improvement in the area that you develop. And that's I really want to reinforce that on the scale of Marshcroft, there is going to be a lot of improvement to Tring, of transition to Tring, which is going to be left behind. I've read, I haven't read every email that I've been sent over the last few days, but I've tried really hard to read as many as I can get to. I still have some more to read. It's really obvious to me that people are struggling to understand how we can be in this position. We've tried to cover that, we've tried to explain that on the scrutiny last week and also this morning. These meetings don't always go on at all. They're usually quite quick meetings, and we've spent a lot of time to try and probe at what's going on. But and I fully recognise that people don't want Tring to change, and they don't, and very often people like their environment to stay broadly as it is. But one of the things that comes forward with new development is schools. One of the things that comes forward is the possibility to transform the transport system, both in terms of walking and cycling, but also in terms of being able to say to a bus company, we're developing 1,800 units over there, and that gives you a bus service to run. So, hello. One of the dangers with, or one of the problems with individual planning applications is that they don't come through with enough force or with enough scale to make a change, but a local plan does do that. So local plans are handled differently in different boroughs and districts, but our intention with this local plan will be to stand behind it, to bang it on the table whenever a developer comes in and says what they plan to do, and say there's a local plan and we're expecting transition and we're expecting improvement to the local area. So I hope that's really clear. Is there anything else on this item? Okay. In that case, just going to go to the recommendations. Bear with me, please. So the recommendations are that Cabinet recommend to Council that the new local plan, Dacorum local plan to 2041, pre-submission version Appendix 1, proposed submission policies map, publication version Appendix 2, and supporting documents be made available for a 6-week period, publication period under Regulation 19 of the Town and Country Planning, Local Planning England Regulations 2012. Following the 6-week period as referred to in Recommendation 1, to authorise the Strategic Director of Place, in consultation with the Leader of the Council, to submit the local plan to pre-submission, together with a statement including how the responses from previous consultations have been taken into account, and a summary of the main issues raised in the publication stage responses to the Secretary of State for independent examination under Regulation 22 of the Town and Country Planning Act. 3, to authorise the Strategic Director for Place, in consultation with the Leader of the Council, to make non-material changes and corrections to the Dacorum Local Plan to 2041 and supporting documents to address editorial, typographical and grammatical errors up to the close of the consultation period. Number 4, to authorise Strategic Director of Place in conjunction with myself to propose changes and corrections, including policy updates, editorial, typographical and grammatical errors up until the end of the examination. 5, to authorise the strategic director of place, once the local plan has been submitted for examination, to invite the examining inspectors to recommend any modifications they consider to be necessary in accordance with section 20, 7C of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, and finally, to approve the new local development scheme October 2024, attached at Appendix 3. Are we agreed? Agreed. Okay. Thank you. We will now revert back to the previous agenda. Oh, I'm sorry.
Chair, it's just one point of process, actually. We have produced a short summary of views expressed by members of the SPAY committee last week, so that's been sent on to Cassie. I think we'll try and get that out just to all members before tomorrow night's evening,
Okay.
Chair. So it's a useful summary, I hope. Thank you.
Right, okay, that's good. More input. Thank you. It's a fantastic agenda. I fully recommend that you will find it interesting, but probably not as interesting as the reason that you came here. Thank you again for coming. Appreciate you coming. Okay, so moving back to item 7, which is the medium-term financial strategy for 2024-25 to 2028-29, 4-year period. This is proposed by me as leader of the council, although we now have a portfolio holder coming in for this. I'm going to ask Chief Financial Officer Nigel Halcott to propose an amendment on a detail point.
Yeah, so just as a very high-level summary, this report's already been through scrutiny. The medium financial term strategy covering 24 to 29. The document is live and will be changed and edited throughout the year as always when financial, economic or political changes are made. But it does set out the core assumptions that we see in our financial planning agenda linked to risks and opportunities, inflationary pressures that are coming and government funding as well. The recommendations are outlined in the report, but there is one slight amendment to recommendation 6, which recommends that Cabinet recommend to Council the approval of the fees and charges in appendices C to F. This is now with the exception of garden waste and garage fees that are going to come under additional review before final authorisation through Council. And one of the points worth noticing, which has come back from comments at scrutiny last week, there are car parking fees in the appendices there with a 0% increase. As this committee are aware, the parking tariff consultation process is underway and coming to a conclusion, and that has been a delegated decision to portfolio holders. So this report is not asking for Council or Cabinet to make any recommendations on car parking fees. Other than that, the report is as is, and the recommendations are there.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I don't think so. One from Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Specifically relating to the change to recommendation, I mean, it became, as you're already, the implications of the fees and charges coming to this report rather than being part of the budget setting in February was not fully, I don't think would have been either fully understood by members or articulated to members that this was a setting, we were setting fees and charges here. I welcome the change to recommendation, but not exclusively that the only 2 items that may still be subject to further review are those 2 which I specifically raised last week. As far as our group is concerned, the whole issue of fees and charges remains an open decision, and therefore we will not support recommendation 6. That in any way, Council is setting any of the fees and charges in stone tomorrow night.
Okay, so just a point of clarification, these fees and charges won't be going on the Council agenda tomorrow. They're on the November agenda, I believe. Is that correct, Mark?
Yeah.
So from that perspective, this is not for the Council discussion tomorrow night. In terms of the point on members, the MTFS, including fees and charges, has been on the forward plan for several months now, both cabinet and scrutiny. So if that message wasn't made abundantly clear to those groups, it was raised at the last 2 or 3 scrutinies that that's what was going to take place, then I will take responsibility for that. But I felt it had been communicated effectively across the group. The decision to bring fees and charges earlier, in line with a lot of other councils, was to allow officers far more time to operationally implement the fees and charges, particularly ones that require a huge amount of administration, like garden waste, that requires a lot of discussion with residents, and giving residents as much time as possible was the reason for moving those fees and charges earlier. There is no other rationale for that other than an operational perspective.
Yeah, so do you want to come back?
Well, only, thank you. I accept in my opinion. I think the fact that the council's changed the policy on the fees and the way fees and charges are set in the time frame was not made clear. I mean, I've been at all those scrutiny committees, unless I dozed off at the wrong moment, and even last week when the 3 leaders were discussing it, it was clear I wasn't the only one who hadn't quite understood the change. So even if it's going to November, it seems to me that when the scrutiny committee in December is discussing the budget, the option on fees and charges still needs to be in that scrutiny discussion, not shut the door before we take the budget to.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm seeing that. That if we come to full council in November, and we're then closing the option to have a discussion on fees and charges in December, we probably shouldn't do that. I will need to allow a bit of time for officers to work out a proper governance-y way of managing that situation. Is that something that you can manage?
I'm looking at Mark Brooks in terms of protocol.
Yeah, well, I'll have to give it a bit of thought, I suppose, in terms of the process. So at the moment we'll be referring everything to November, but are you saying you want, so as well, a bit of clarity on what you're proposing in terms of agreement?
So I think fees and charges are something like almost half of the income of the council.
Yeah.
So they're not something that we can put on one side too easily. We will need to, I think, try and come to a consensus as to how that's going to be managed, which we may be able to do quickly, or it may take a little bit longer. If it takes a little bit longer, then we may not be able to bring the MTFS to council, and we would need to have another plan for that.
But I think at that point you'd have to separate the fees and charges from the rest of the MTFS. So my proposal would be to keep it as amended and as presented, and then there's a bit of time, a bit of space to have those discussions. It's the 13th of November, so you've got a little bit of time to try and work out where you sit on that.
Okay. Are you content with that?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, my understanding was it was tomorrow night. It does give us more time to have those discussions between ourselves before November. But to be constructive in future years. Now I understand where the timetable proposed. We will engage in that process earlier because we understand it comes to a conclusion much earlier. It's the fact we didn't know that this year, and we didn't raise any. Well, I mean, to be fair, Nigel raised the issue around green bins and garage charges specifically at last week's scrutiny. We didn't engage in the discussion there because we didn't understand that we were effectively closing the door on that by sending it to council. It was that lack of understanding, which may be my fault, but in future we will engage more constructively earlier to avoid this issue.
Yeah, and I second that. Councillor,
just seeking some clarity. Presumably officers need to have the fees and charges agreed, ready to be able to do some budgetary work with some certainty. So pushing the fees and charges to December, is that what I've understood is being proposed? Probably puts officers in a difficult position.
So my understanding is we are proceeding with the amendment to the recommendation, given that it will go to November Council, which is on the 13th, and I would support that by requesting that we put the fees and charges on the Finance and Resources scrutiny on the 5th of November to allow the committee to then have another chance to review those proposed fees and charges prior to a council agreement or not agreement.
Are there any other questions on the MTFS at this point? Save them all for the fireworks on 5th of November. Excellent.
Thank you.
In that case, I come to the recommendation. The Cabinet approves the MTFS for 24-25 to 28-29 as set out in Appendix A to the report, subject to the amendment that we've heard. Notes a 4-year general fund saving requirement of 2.5 million between now and 2029, which is quite a sum. Notes that the Chief Financial Officer will work with the Council's strategic leadership team and Cabinet to deliver options that will achieve the medium-term saving targets. Endorses the financial planning framework to support the budget setting process for 25-26. Agrees that the Chief Financial Officer be requested to revise the medium-term financial strategy and represent to Cabinet for approval if material changes to forecasts are required following future government announcements, particularly at the end of this month. And 6, recommends that Council approves the fees and charges in Appendices C to F, subject to the amendment that we've heard about. Are we agreed? Agreed? Thank you. Okay, and moving on to our next item, which is the Maylands Masterplan. Also, again, in my name, under place. And can I ask James to introduce this item, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, so this is a very comprehensive piece of work, members which you're being asked to approve today. It was reported to the Scrutiny Committee, Strategic Planning Environment Scrutiny Committee last week. I just want to draw out a few points with this. So this is a new 20-year master plan for Maylands to meet the challenges of the future. The last Maylands master plan was adopted as long ago as 2007, Chair, so this is long overdue, this piece of work, but circumstances have changed. Maylands is growing because we have now the Hemel Garden Communities programme, and part of that programme does involve a very major expansion of Maylands out to the east, between where we have Buncefield Oil Terminal and the M1 motorway. Because that land is in St Albans, this is a partnership piece of work. So a lot of work's gone into this. So it's been commissioned between Dacorum Borough Council, St Albans City and District Council, County Council, and Hemel Garden Communities, and Hertfordshire Innovation Quarter, which is our Hertfordshire's enterprise zone as well. So it's been a partnership piece of work. Members will note from the report that there are three main parts to this. There is a 20-year vision, as I've indicated. There is an immediate opportunity plan, and some work has been done to look at sites which are available now for development or regeneration, to see what scope there is to get things moving shortly, and then a new design code to look at what's appropriate in terms of design around the business park, according to the character of the different sort of zones that we have around Maylands. So this is a policy statement which you're being invited to approve this morning. Just to make it clear that at the current point, this is not intended to act as a supplementary planning document. This, I think, will come a little later down the line. And I think in conjunction with St Albans as well, because for this to have credibility as a supplementary planning document, ideally you'd want both authorities agreeing on a similar approach, because the area spans both that district and this borough as well. So, but it is a good step along the way. If we want to do an SPD a little bit further down the line, then we have that opportunity to do so. Hopefully the rest of the report speaks for itself. Chair, there are a number of documents appended to the report which make up the master plan, and I'm happy to take any questions. Also have my colleague Caroline Saunders online as well, who's our head of place and enterprise, and she'll be between us we can advise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yes. As ward councillor for the whole of Maylands, but that's not particularly my interest in this, because obviously Maylands is far more significant than one ward is significant for the whole of Hemel. Just a couple of questions really. One is around we previously had an Article 4 direction to halt the conversion of commercial premises to residential, which I welcome, because I think we were going too far in terms of converting some unsuitable buildings to residential. Is that still in place?
Yes.
And are we still able to control that?
Yes.
And then it's alluded to in the master plan about the desire or the over-reliance upon logistics and desire to encourage more high-value businesses, if you like, on the better expression. But we've currently got two significant head office buildings, being Parker, Handerfin and Hemel 1. One is currently having a logistics warehouse built on it, and the other one has an application to demolish good quality offices and put a logistics warehouse on it. Is it realistic that we can resist the market, if you like, in terms of converting some of the good quality, higher ranking employment buildings into simple logistics, or are we just not in a position to do that?
So I think I think it's a really good point Councillor Williams makes, actually. So I think there's a difference between what we can control through the planning process, and I think we probably don't have quite as much scope there, but this is a good step along the way about setting an aspiration for Maylands, which we'd look to do through our work that we do with Hertfordshire Futures and other bodies about promoting Maylands and promoting Hemel as a location for inward investment. What we've sought to do is to pick up on growth sectors around the county as well, and how Maylands can play its part in supporting those future growth sectors for the future of Hertfordshire economy. But that does very much depend on economic promotion work, which, as I say, we will do with our partners. The market, I clearly agree with you, is doing one thing at the moment, and we're having to respond to that. We don't necessarily have the planning controls aren't of a status that you can necessarily say no to those. So I think the solution is more around economic promotion and the success of that, but using this as a good platform to put the business park forward. I think just to add to that, there have been the state of the office market and so on is quite challenging up there at the moment. I do meet with one of our major commercial agents on a regular basis, and feedback I get back is that this isn't the interest there for offices. So there is at least one office block there which has been on the market for some time now, and the planning service has received at least some tentative inquiries about alternative uses, but it's a challenging location given its, as we've discussed before, its distance from the station. So, but hopefully the way forward.
The office market's been poor for the last 20 years, and COVID's probably made that worse in terms of need. But that's
Yeah, I've been disappointed by some recent developments in Maylands where we've had big data centres and warehouses installed with curved roofs, for example. So there didn't seem to be that there could be much more opportunity to use those roof spaces for solar panels, for example, to have the structure and access that would enable that. And also the enormous power that is being thrown away from data centres through their heat exchangers. You see clouds of steam going up. And there have been a lot of initiatives by the government and others to share that heat with adjacent housing developments and swimming pools and things like that, which would which would be very beneficial to the cost of living and to the environment. Does this plan enable those things to happen?
I think, Chair, it's more a matter for the local plan and planning policies sort of to do that work and discussions with developers. This is more about the promotion of Maylands and the sorts of businesses we bring in rather than the sort of the detail and so on. But I think what you're alluding to, Councillor Bryan, is things like district heat networks, and as you've referred to, for photovoltaics and so on. So we do have some policies in the emerging local plan to deal with that. As I've advised members before, one of the limitations we have is that under previous government advice, we're very much reliant on building regulations to deliver those kind of energy efficiency and sustainability benefits rather than the planning service. But if Ronan would like to add anything from as we're looking at our new local plan.
Yeah, if I may. Wasn't expecting this, so thank you. So the local plan does have a chapter on economic development, and importantly, I think all round, we do have a new updated study for South West Hertfordshire economic study, 2024, which looks at, in particular, the various uses, office, data centres, industrial, etc., and it provides a really comprehensive narrative on it, and that has informed the local plan policies. Ultimately, we are seeking to protect our existing employment areas. That is the focus right now. It's not so much about identifying lots of new land. We have the expansion of Maylands to the east, and that's within the St Albans plan. We're working with the St Albans on that. We do have a lot of policies regarding this, but as I said, the focus is now about really kind of getting control again. Because as you say, we've got housing schemes coming in, and as I said, dare I say, it's the absence of an up-to-date plan means that you might find you're delivering housing in some of the locations you don't necessarily want to see them. And that is a consequence of that. So having the local plan up to date on that, you're absolutely right. In terms of efficiencies and standards, we do require, I think, all economic development or employment development to be seeking BREEAM excellent standards in terms of efficiencies and that. We are still able to do that through the plan making process. The local planning, as I said, Chapter 6 includes a lot regarding climate change, sustainability, low carbon heat energy networks. They're setting the requirements of that too for new developments coming forward. So it is about, in my opinion, getting a plan that's up to date and in place, and having that up to date evidence supporting it gives us the best possible chance of being able to push back on things we perhaps don't necessarily want to see.
Thank you, Ronan. Chair, can I just make a couple of other points here? I mean, if you look in the document itself, there is a section dedicated to climate change, and there are some initiatives in there. They're pretty high level, and just one point I wanted to make about the whole master plan is because it is a long-term strategy, care has been taken not to make this plan overly prescriptive, as practices and issues will change over that period. But it's a framework from which we can drive further initiatives and strategies from for the future, and things that Councillor Brown was referring to may well be one such thing as part of the climate change strategy. So it's certainly an issue. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions on this item? Looking to pick up the pace on the meeting now. I'm sure everyone's happy to hear that. So the recommendation is that the Cabinet approves the Maylands Master Plan as set out in the report. Are we agreed? Agreed. Good. Okay. And now we move on to item 10, which is the tenant satisfaction measures, TSMs, for 23-24. And I'll turn to Councillor Diani.
Thank you. So this is a report just to provide an overview, and it is for us to just note, but TSM is the tenant satisfaction measure report, basically. Is followed from a regulation was introduced in February 2024. It's basically how we report and record the satisfaction measures of our tenants. We have provided this report, which was also submitted to the Regulator of Social Housing. This report basically ensures that we ensure tenants are safe in their homes. We listen to tenants' complaints and respond promptly to put things right. We are also accountable to tenants and treat them with fairness and respect. We know more about the condition of every home and the needs of people who live in them. We also collect and use data effectively across a range of areas, including repairs. There is a software we are using now, which is the feedback, and I had a brief on that, and I can see the effectiveness, how it can be utilized to produce further surveys, how we're really going to engage with our tenants. So all of this data will feed back into policies and documents to improve the services we provide to a tenant, and it would be an annual report for Cabinet, but I think quarterly for the Scrutiny Committee. Thank you.
Is there anything that officers would like to add to?
Yeah, we take questions.
Yeah. Are there any questions on the tenant satisfaction measures report. You're leaning forward, Councillor Allen.
Well, I'm just wondering whether there's an opportunity to congratulate the department for such good progress.
That's very good. Should we have a round of applause? Thank you. So no more questions. So the recommendation is that Cabinet notes the report. Noted? Noted. Thank you. So now we come to item 11, parking solutions, formerly known as verge hardening, which I think Robert, Councillor Brom was going to introduce.
We've been had people asking about this over the last year and what happened to it. There was a parking verge hardening scheme which kind of stopped a couple of years ago, but the budget was still there and was accumulating. So I get regular calls from residents who struggle to get along the pavements in their mobility scooters and things like that. So there's a lot of pavement parking at the moment. Got people parking on the grass verges, which turns them into mud pits in the winter. And there's also some trends which are like, there seems to be more people bringing commercial vehicles back to their homes at night. And so we've got so we've been making a list of all of the sites that may be suitable for converting grass areas primarily into parking areas. It does seem a terrible shame. It's not something that we really take lightly, that we really want to do. We want to maximise the green space because of all the benefits it provides, the cooling and the biodiversity and things like that. But we have to be pragmatic, and the central government unfortunately has not implemented public transport as well as I think it should have, and we can't just keep on holding our breath to hope that that's suddenly going to happen. We do need to reduce reliance on cars, but unfortunately we're forced into this situation where people are unable to, we've got this parking congestion, people unable to get along their pavements. So there's, I believe, 1.2 million of capital available for the next 3 years, and Ian has been doing a big job of collecting all of the sites available, and we've agreed some prioritisation criteria for so that we can work on the most viable and the most needy schemes. So I think we're able to do a couple of dozen out of 65 or so, and or I think even more, 84 I think was the last count that I've made a note of here. It does exclude some things like school pickup and drop-off points, and it doesn't at the moment have things like sustainable drainage in there, which could also be, which we may want to pay attention to later on.
Very good. Anything you'd like to add to that, Ian?
No, just, regularly get requests, so having this policy in place allow us to almost two-step. One, first check whether schemes are eligible to move forward via the policy, and secondly allow us to rank schemes so we move the most important ones forward.
Yeah. Very good. Councillor Allen.
Excuse me if I missed that. There was a lot of reading. There was previous discussion about maybe linking it to SIL, the ward SIL contributions, and whether there was an opportunity to link this budget with a contribution from the ward SIL to deliver particular schemes.
I suppose it could be expanded. My understanding is the revenue has accumulated over the last few years, so that's the primary source, but that could be a route to expanding the scheme. We haven't discussed that.
Maybe ward councillors could be approached for contributions to help it go further, and everybody's a winner as a result.
I'm sure parking is a quite high up on people's list of things they want improved. So, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Yeah, obviously welcome the report. I still find the term parking solution strange when it's a simple one. It seems a very long, complicated policy to put some parking pads on grass verges, but I'm pleased we're here. What's not in the report, but what Councillor Bronwyn has alluded to, is that there is been some prioritisation, and there are 24, I think he said, schemes that could be funded from the current allocation. So my two questions are, when can we see the schemes that have been given the highest priority, the ones that are likely to go ahead, and what's the timescale? I mean, I would like to say immediately, but it doesn't seem very difficult to put, parking pads on grass verges, but we seem to have made it very complicated. So what's the timescale to start, and can we see where these initial schemes are?
There is a post we need to recruit to, and their first priority, once recruited, will be to start assessing the 84 schemes that are currently on the long list.
Oh, right. Okay, so sorry. I thought Councillor Bronwyn indicated it was 24 that could be funded, and therefore I'd assume they've been given the prioritisation and costed.
Well, under the previous, if they cost the same as they did a few years ago, then 40 schemes would get done. But with inflation, it would be a couple of dozen, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a bit clearer, yes. Okay, so we haven't prioritised anything, so we are some way off. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think we need the policy first, don't we? We need the policy. We've got the policy. Now we can do the prioritisation, and if there are any local SIL funds out there which are struggling to find something to spend the money on, then this might be the opportunity.
Making active suggestions to councillors, because many times they have money sitting and they just don't know what to do with that.
Okay, are we all done? We're getting towards the end. Maybe we probably can't do it before 12 o'clock. So the recommendation is to approve the report. To adopt and commence delivery of the parking solutions policy, to delegate authority to approve the delivery of schemes to the strategic director, and neighbourhood operations in consultation with the portfolio holder, and also for neighbourhood operations. Are we agreed? Agreed. Good. Okay. Moving on to our final item, which is proposals to establish Dacorum Investment Partnership, or an IP. This was discussed at scrutiny last week at Finance and Resources, and I'm going to hand over to Nigel to just briefly introduce this.
So I just give a very high-level synopsis, because we spent a long time at scrutiny last week in a leaders group discussing this. The council is trying to unlock the potential that we have in some of our assets and our land, and looking to meet our strategic objectives of delivering as much housing as quickly as possible, and also developing some of the commercial strands we can do around some of those assets. One of the avenues that we've been looking at off the back of the strategic asset review is what delivery vehicles we can use, and a presentation went in July to scrutiny looking at the different delivery vehicles. After that, we've gone down the avenue of investigating the option of an investment partnership, so bringing in an expert third party to help us unlock some of the potential that we have and to achieve some of the ambition that we want in terms of housing delivery and improving our assets overall. What this report is asking for is for Cabinet to recommend to Council a one-off drawdown of £230,000 to allow us to get initially some external expertise, be it from a finance perspective, procurement perspective and legal, to go out and find a suitable partner for ourselves that meets our strategic objectives to be able to unlock some of the potential we've got in our assets that at the moment, by ourselves, we're unable to make financially viable and unlock. So this is a programme that other councils are going down at the moment, and one of the examples we've looked at is the Cambridge example for members that weren't part of scrutiny last week. Please go away and look at it. It's hopefully going to provide a partnership for many years. This is not a short-term objective, it's a medium to long-term objective, that they can work on all our major developments with us and bring their expertise and some of their financing and some of their desire to make Hemel and Dacorum much greater than it is at the moment.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on the investment partnership? No. I mean, from my point of view, I see this as buying a new tool for the council. We will then need to make use, at least some use of that tool in order to justify the cost of buying it. Judging by the examples that we've followed to get to this point, there is every prospect that this tool could receive a lot of use over the next few years, and could be an efficient way of regenerating some of the assets that we've identified, bringing more creativity into the process, and producing a return which is capable of allowing us the latitude to look at some of our priorities, which we currently don't have the resources to deal with. It needs to start to be used, it needs to grow in scale and prove its worth. One of the things that I find attractive about it is the control that we have to actually step back from projects which are suggested to us if we don't find them attractive from our point of view. The only imperative really is that we will have spent £230,000 on a new tool, and it would be appropriate for the council to try and make good use of that tool. Any other comments? No? In that case, we'll just move to recommendations, and we might even finish before 12. The recommendation is that Cabinet delegates approval to the Strategic Director, Corporate and Commercial, supported by statutory officers in consultation with the portfolio holder for corporate and commercial services, to design and undertake a competitive selection process to select a suitable partner or partners to work in conjunction with the council on an investment partnership model. Number 2, approves commissioning of suitable independent advice on the financial, tax, legal, procurement and governance arrangements to ratify the approach. And 3, recommends to the council approval of a one-off drawdown of £230,000 from the council development reserves to undertake work related to creating and entering into the investment partnership or partnerships. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. And so close the meeting, and thank you all for patience with us at 11:57.